Welcome to today's webinar. The topic today is on how to find my CAM user files or CAM data and back this important stuff up. My name is Joe Sanders. I'm one of the application engineers at M2 Technologies. Today's webinar is geared to the Edgecam and Surfcam user, and we'll be explaining how to locate a lot of the things that are important files to make sure you know where they are. We want to mention this is a live webcast. You'll be able to tell by the ands and ums and other things that are certainly not a polished, perfectly scripted demo. We want to note that questions can be submitted using the GoToMeeting chat window. We'll answer them at the end of the webinar or by email. For purposes of audio, we're going to mute phones during the presentation. As we get to the question session, if you'd like to ask a question and have a discussion with us, we can certainly unmute your line at that time so that we can do that. So what are user files? Probably the best description of it would be once you've installed the software and activated the license, the software is ready to use. But is it ready to use in your environment? What about your post processors, your tooling database, files you may use and have, settings you may have on the workstation? These are the collection of things that we're going to term user files. Those might be things such as the CAM files that you produce with the software, CNC code files, your post processors, tooling database, automation utilities, or software defaults and screen layouts, just as a few of the things. We find that most users have a pretty good system that works for them of where they store their CAM files and CNC code. Very few customers seem to store them locally on their workstations. Many store them on a network location or perhaps a remote drive. Makes a lot of sense. So for purposes of today's discussion, we're going to focus on the remaining four. Out of these, we're going to start with post processors in the tool store database. These are probably the most critical files for most users if you think of if you lost these and you had to recreate them from the ground up, how much work is involved in that. But we're also going to touch on the remaining two in green as we get further into the presentation. So when we talk about post processors are real important to any CAM software. It's what takes the graphical input from the CAM software and produces CNC code with the expectation that that code is immediately ready to use without any edits needed. If that's not what your post processor does, you certainly should reach out to us so we can help you with making sure that your company has post processors that are fully turnkeyed to your machine and to your preferences. In Edgecam and Surfcam, the CodeWizard file is your master post processor. CodeWizard files have a .cgd file extension. So if we're hunting down where the master posts are on a computer, that's what we're looking for, *.cgd. The CAM software really doesn't care where you save those things. You can save the post anywhere you want. Now when you compile it, it installs it to a specific place, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But in terms of the CodeWizard file, your master post, you could save it anywhere you want. We really advocate for a lot of users that you probably should save these on a network location where it's backed up regularly, or perhaps on an external drive or flash drive or some secure location. Because again, if you ever lose these and they need to be recreated from the ground up, and we don't have a magic wand to wave to suddenly make that happen. Now we did mention about compiling posts. When we open up a CodeWizard file and we click the compile button, that places the post processors that the CAM system uses during the CAM process in what we call the user location under CAM and MacDef. So let's say, for example, we have a customer with a FANUC compatible mill post, and they've named their post FANUC mill. If they do a search on their computer for FANUC mill, they're probably going to find the stuff in the user CAM MacDef, which are compiled files, and that'll be great for being able to let someone use those within the CAM software. But if we want to edit or maintain or further refine that post, we need to find the FANUC mill.cgd, the master post. So make sure you know where your master posts are. They can spawn and create the compiled files, but the compiled files aren't going to create the master post for us. Okay. Another important file is the tool store database. Let's talk for a moment about what's in the database. At the core level, the tool store database contains your company's tools. The most productive companies view this as their company's virtual tool crib. But it does a lot more than just tools. The database can store the common materials that your company works with, common work holding fixtures that you use, additional information about your CNC machines, such as stroke limits, for example. And this data is interrelated. So materials and tools are leveraged to have cutting data lookup. Tools can be further organized into job kits for the purposes of automating tool decisions and selection, and also collecting information back from the CAM software to create live job reports. For many companies over time, the tool store database is a tremendous engineering asset that has a lot of important, valuable data to your company. It might take days or even weeks to reproduce all of that data. In some ways, it might be considered invaluable. We definitely want to back that up. So where are the database files? Well, there's actually two components to database files. One of them is the active database, your virtual tool crib. And that is a SQL database. So the CAM system database runs on Microsoft SQL Server. You don't have to purchase Microsoft SQL Server to use it, but it does run on that. And that's where the tool, job kit, materials, cutting data, fixtures, and other information is stored. There's also an item called the support files folder. This is a common folder location for ancillary files that are linked to from inside the database. So those would be things such as custom tool graphics, holders, attachments, and fixtures, and so on. When we go out to customer sites and work with clients, we sometimes see a question that's well-intentioned but a little off base, and someone's just asking, well, where's the SQL data? Tell me where the files for the SQL data are so that I can back them up. That's not really the right approach. There's not a bunch of magical files there that you can find and just move somewhere else. You need to think of SQL more as a software installation, in the same sense that I could go take all the files on the Edgecam DVD image and I could copy them to all the places that they might ultimately need to wind up on the computer, but that doesn't mean that Edgecam will launch. I have to go through an install process for the software in order for it to do that. SQL is viewed much the same way, or should be. So in order to help users work with that, the Edgecam and Surfcam software suites include a piece of software called Tool Store Administrator, and it really simplifies the database management without having to know anything about SQL Server. This utility can help with all of the things needed to manage the databases on the local workstation. So working from the launcher, if you go to the Applications area, there's an orangish block called Tool Store. When you click on that, it expands. And in there's a dark blue block called Tool Store Administrator. This is where you get to the Tool Store Administrator. And it has a primary function of setting the active database on the local workstation and also assigning where the support files folder is located. But it also has ancillary tasks. And those are, again, working on the local workstation to create a new database, or to back up, upgrade, or delete databases. So if we're looking to back up the database off one computer and move it over to another computer, this is the utility that we're going to use to get that done. So we talked about master post processors. We've talked about the tool store database. The other files that we want to work with are often best managed and hunted down, so to speak, using the software's file locations utility. So when we go to the launcher, and in the same applications area, right where we got to the Tool Store Administrator, there's a settings tile. When you click on settings, it opens up a main screen, and at the bottom of that is a row of tiles across the bottom, and on the left side in red is a tile called file locations. When you click on that, it opens up the dialog box that I've shown here on the screen. The purpose of this utility is to assign paths to various important CAM files. And quite frankly, it allows personal configurations. Now, when we go through a typical Edgecam install, the user doesn't have to touch a thing inside the file locations box. The software installation takes care of that. But this is a place where companies with specialty deployments, perhaps things located on a network, or a custom file paths that they've set up, or multi-user environments, might want to create their own mapping for where the software should find some of these important files. And that utility allows us to do that. If we look at the utility from a standpoint of how we'd use it here, we would use it to easily locate the assigned paths on the workstation. So if my task is to go out to a client site and to hunt down where these files are and help find them, we're going to want to locate the assigned paths and use this utility to hunt them down. Equally helpful, this utility allows us to directly go to where those paths are. Let's go see how this works. I've opened up the Edgecam 2017 R2 launcher. And when we scroll over a bit and go to the applications area, and click on the settings tile. Here in the tile, we can get to file locations. So when we click on file locations, we have a dialog on screen that allows us to go through the management functions we just talked about, hunt down user paths. So for example, we see the second item down is the tool store support folder, and there's an entire path in here. I can right click over that path, and I have an option to open the folder directly. That opens up Windows Explorer and brings me directly to this path that we've been looking at here. So if I want to find the tool store support files folder and back the whole path up, for example, or copy it to another computer, I'm right there. If we go to the next item down, it's called Master Strategy folder. Now when I click on the title Master Strategy folder, there's a description that opens up that tells a little bit more about what this path does. But notice in here it does not include a hard-coded text. It simply says user, themes, default, strategy. If I right click over this, I can directly go to that folder, wherever that happens to be. When we go into here, we can see that this is on my workstation under Documents, some folder path, Themes, Default, Strategy. So if we put the two side by side, notice that this is User, Themes, Default, Strategy. Looking here, I see Themes, Default, Strategy. So being the very smart folks that we all are, we can see that from Edgecam on back to the left, it must be where the user path points to. And you'd be correct if that's what you were thinking. Another way to find that is that if we go to Open Folder Location and select User, notice that that immediately brings up the user path as you see here. So the user path is located under the My Documents place. This is consistent with Microsoft recommendations for file structure. And this is basically a little clue that if we back up the My Documents path on the workstation, we've easily got pretty much all the files other than perhaps your CAM files, your CNC code files, master post processors, and tool store database stuff, which has a little more flexibility on where you choose to deploy it as a user. Okay. So, bringing us to the discussion about what files should we back up. We would advise that you should back up your My Documents path. That's consistent with Microsoft recommendations. So as we mentioned, the user path is contained in My Documents. If we've got a new workstation that we're setting up, on the new workstation, I'd usually start with installing the CAM software. I'd activate the license. Point the tool store database to the place we want it to go, open up Code Wizard, compile the post processors, but then to finish off the job, we probably go out to My Documents and take the My Documents from the old workstation and take the My Documents from the new workstation and make sure that at least the important files are copied over. terms of what would I keep off my old workstation while I'm in the transition process, I'd have a backup of the entire My Documents folder. This is what we've done personally on my own workstations. Keep that backup of the old My Documents, and inevitably there may be a file unrelated to CAM completely, maybe some other piece of software. There's a file missing, and I know that I can go to My Documents usually and hunt that down and easily get that file that was important to me and I didn't remember where it was. You should back up the tool store database. So the tool store administrator is where you can create a backup that creates a single file which has a .tdb file extension. We have a tech tip on our website that goes through the very simple process of moving a database from one computer to another. And it goes through the process of using Tool Store Administrator to create a backup off the old machine, and then using Tool Store Administrator on the new machine to create a new database from that backup. We want to point out there's also command line options available for automatic backups. This could be helpful for company situations where maybe the database is shared on a network. So we want that database backed up, we want it updated, we want it to happen automatically as part of company backup policy. If you go to Tool Store Administrator from the CAM software, from the launcher, go to Tool Store Administrator and click on Help. And at the bottom of the Help section are command line options. And it mentions the command line options that could be included in an automatic software for backing up data. The support files folder is also important. You want to make sure to back that up. Obviously your master post processors, your CAM files, and your CNC code. We want to mention a couple of tips or suggestions related to network deployments and multi-user deployments. And I want to begin with just a short reminder to people that what we've talked about to this point are strategies that work well for a software that's gone through a typical install where the data is on the local workstation. If you start to work outside of there, you now have a custom configuration, and custom configurations are often very personalized to specific environments, and the rules of I know where to find that file begin to get a little bit muddied. But speaking generally at the big picture level, if we were setting up a network location, we would probably want to put the things in there that are common to perhaps multiple users or common and important to our company. So those would be things like our tool store database can be hosted from the network. If that's being done, the support files folder should also be on the network. I believe very strongly that your master post processors should be stored on a network or some location where they're backed up. Certainly your CAM and CNC code files that are the products of the CAM system, those should also be there. So really on the user workstation, the only thing that's left in there are the default files and the themes. And those are the things that would often be stored on the local workstation. Themes are the modern term for where you get your collection of stuff ranging from your software screen layout to masks, to strategies, and other things like that. Automation's a little bit of a interesting topic, and that could vary depending on how companies want to do things, but generally speaking, we would advise that company-specific automation, maybe masks or PCI macros or strategies or software plugins that are important to capture your company's process and to do things the way your company likes to have them done. That stuff should probably be stored on the network and mapped that way. There's also personal automation tools. So I may have some personal things that I use for part of my job, but they're not really reflecting company policy. And so your personal tools might be stuff to just leave on the user workstation. I want to mention if there are companies that are considering network or multi-user deployments or looking to further refine how their existing deployment works, we can assist you with that. Again, that's often personal and unique to each company. So we do have CAD/CAM management services that we can provide with that, whether your deployment's on a network, putting a bunch of stuff out there, or connecting multiple users or even multiple sites. We can assist with that. Perhaps it's software updates or new version rollouts, content management or updating or even update training. So contact us if you need help with any of that. We do suggest that if you have a network or multi-user or multi-site deployment, that you probably should have documentation about where that stuff is located, because inevitably there's going to be someone new that comes in that's tasked with working within or even managing that, and you want them to know where that data is so that it doesn't become tribal knowledge that's lost if a key person at the company is not available on the day that you have a specific question or problem. Again, if those are things that even the documentation end is something to assist with, we can help with that. Just reach out and let us know. As we wrap up, let's go to your questions. Reminder that questions can be submitted through the chat window, through the question window. If it's easier to ask your question than type it, just let us know you have a question. We'll be happy to unmute your line.
At M2 Technologies, our sales executives, technical advisors, and support team are available to assist with your software applications, questions, and needs. Reach out and let us know how we can help you. Don't miss out on the opportunity to connect with M2. Follow us on social media for updates, special announcements, and exclusive promotions. You can also watch helpful videos on our YouTube channel and visit our blog for tips and tricks that will boost your productivity.